New York Jets and the Minnesota Vikings. As we sit right now, Vikings are 3-point home favorites over the New York Football Jets, a total of 44.5. The Mike White Show went out, did what the Mike White Show was supposed to do against what we have already said is the absolute worst defense in all of the NFL. In the middle of that game, they lost two of the only guys that had a pulse on that defensive squad. And so Mike White comes out looking like a savior, in which he just did what he was supposed to do against the worst defense in the entire NFL. Vikings get it done on Thanksgiving, find themselves where they can clinch the North this week. So in week 13, Vikings can clinch the division and not have to worry about whether they're going to the playoffs or not here pretty soon. I'll start with you, Steven. You are backing the New York Jets in this one.
Yeah, I'm good with any way to back the Jets in this game, to be honest with you. Our senior writer, Mo Nawara, bet them to cover 3. He also sprinkled some money line. I'm being a little more conservative. I teased this up. I think we're going to hit 2.5 in this game. I got it early. So this is kind of my anchor teaser leg of the week here. I've taken the Jets a little unconventional. It's not your straight Wong teaser, but up to 9 in all my teasers this week on a 6-point teaser here. So Matt, you and I are just going to continue to disagree on the Minnesota Vikings here. I think they are far outperforming what their record is if you look at their statistical profile. You and I last season and in the preseason railed against the Las Vegas Raiders as the luckiest team in the NFL last year. And the Vikings are arguably even luckier than the Raiders were a year ago. The Raiders were 5-1 in games decided by a field goal or less. The Vikings are 3-0 in that category. The Raiders went 7-2 overall in one-score games last year. The Vikings are already 8-0 in that stat. They ranked 7th in fumble luck. The Vikings are 4th this year. The Raiders won 8 games in which they trailed at some point last year. The Vikings have already trailed in 7 games this year. And Todd Furman also had a great stat this week. The plus 5-point differential overall for the Vikings this year is the worst in the NFL to this point in the season by a team with 9 wins in history. So this is, I think, a team that is far outperforming what their overall record is. And I think their defense is horrible. I think they're number 31 in yards per play allowed. They're 26th in success rate allowed, 24th in pressure rate. No, the Bears were not a good defense for Mike White to face last week, but he's not getting tested this week either against the Vikings defense. And I think the Jets defense is phenomenal. And I think that they're going to be able to pressure without blitzing Minnesota this week. So yeah, I'm just going to continue to fade Minnesota, and maybe they continue to get lucky and the coin flip comes up their way in these fourth quarters. But you know, you and I have talked a lot about other teams like this, and I'm still a little surprised that you like Minnesota as much as you do.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of differences as well in the teams that you're talking about. I mean, you talk about the Raiders last year. The Raiders don't have the last year's version of the Raiders don't have a speck of the talent that is on the Minnesota Vikings side of things. So I mean, like the coaching staff is in Minnesota comparatively to the coaching staff in Las Vegas, completely different as well. It's not apples to apples year over year. It's not, or it's literally apples to oranges when you're talking about these two different teams. And if you want to say that the Minnesota defense is not great, perfectly fine. Now, if you want to look at some of the statistical categories that are out there that you like to rattle off the ones that back your argument and not the ones that don't, you can sit there and say that, oh, there are actually pretty good elements to this defense as well. To even put them in the same sentence as what the Bears are rolling out is a disservice to our listeners and our viewers, because they are not even anywhere on the same level. The Bears are so far worse on a defensive front than every other team in the NFL. And like I said, including the Texans at this point, they are completely talentless. On top of that, you are rolling out a secondary that is literally out there on their 3rd and 4th strings at this point. I mean, it's not even an actual true comparison.
They're still a bottom 5 defense. They're bottom 5 defense in a lot of ways, at generously a bottom 10 that just gave up more than 7 yards per play to an offense that you hate in the Patriots.
The other side of this is you still have to score points in the NFL to win games. And we're going to sit here and look at the Jets offense that they're making no bones about this, is absolute garbage. It has been one of the most garbage units in all the NFL over the course of the entire NFL season. And yet we're going to have a guy who came in and had one game against a against the worst defense in the NFL and crown him that he's just going to go out and do this against other teams that actually have some sort of pulse. That is so incredibly results oriented and so incredibly being a prisoner of the moment from what we saw with Mike White last week. There's a reason he was third string whenever the season started. There's a reason the guy is
because they spent a high draft pick on Zach Wilson and felt obligated to play him, who has been trashed. The entire Jets offense this year has been about Zach Wilson being terrible.
And they went to Flacco instead of Mike White because why? Because they were so tied up in him. They had so much investment in Flacco. No, that wasn't the case either. He was third string for a reason, and he's a third string quarterback for a reason. The Vikings are going to win this game. Not only are they going to win this game, they're going to win this game by double digits. And you can.
Wow! If they do, it's my worst week of the year. If that happens, it's my worst week of the year.
Well, that's unfortunate that you have all of that in there. Then, Adam, what do you look at in this one?
When mom and dad fight, I just sit here quietly and wait for the storm to
Listen,
end.
here's the thing about this. We at this specifically at our site as well are one of the most egregious offenders of all this. Everybody's fraudulent. Everybody, all they do. Listen, I get after everybody that does content for us, because all everybody wants to do is come on camera or get in an article and talk about how fraudulent everybody is in the NFL. No one's good. If you listen or read or whatever, the only good team's the Chiefs, kind of the Bills, and everybody else is fraudulent. And that's like you have to get to a point where we're 13 weeks into the NFL season and you have to throw away priors, because we've gotten to that point as well. And you have to deal with what you see on the field and what is going on with your own eyeballs. And so it's insanity to me that everyone wants to get in this group think that everybody's fraudulent. This is fraudulent. This wins fraudulent. This team's fraudulent. This is fraudulent. That's exactly, it's the worst. It's the worst low hanging fruit handicapping that you can possibly do.
We've switched from mom and dad arguing to middle-aged man yells at cloud, but that's okay. I understand exactly where Matt is coming from. I understand his frustration. I have, for a couple of weeks, have been saying that we need to evaluate against like teams this year, right? I've been talking about it with Philadelphia, where I've said that the Philadelphia Eagles in another year are not a 9-1 team, but you know what? They are this year, and they're not going to play anybody the rest of the year. And so they're probably going to finish with the best record in the NFL if they continue to play the game that they've played. For this week, I'm going to give you guys a process idea when it comes to evaluating the Minnesota Vikings. Last year, the Minnesota Vikings lost 8 one-score games. They won 6 one-score games. They were a team that essentially showed you we're close, right? We're pretty close to being able to do something. And if that one little thing that they're close to being able to do is we needed better coaching, we needed better ability to finish games well, to make smarter decisions in tight situations, then the Minnesota Vikings aren't all that different than they were last year. And if you're going to try to figure out a team that has been outperforming the numbers, then what you're trying to do from a betting perspective is you're trying to thread the needle to say, this is the week where it all comes out, right? Because for the Minnesota Vikings, and I'll give you the New York Giants as an example as well. For the Giants, you could have made a lot of money on the Giants up until the bottom dropped out against Detroit. Well, that's fine. If the bottom ultimately dropped out against Detroit, you lost that week, but you probably won quite a bit on the Giants up until that point. And I think the argument can be the same with the Minnesota Vikings, that maybe there comes a time where the bottom drops out on the Minnesota Vikings, but up until that point, you'll have done pretty well playing the Vikings. And so this week in particular, I'm passing because of the Mike White situation, because as Matt said, it's 1 week, right? And if you don't buy the Vikings as a team that's outperforming the metrics, then you probably don't buy Mike White as a quarterback who's outperforming the priors and the metrics on him. So I'll pass, but I will just have the popcorn out and a cold beverage in hand, watching the two of you play this whole thing out on the Minnesota Vikings this week.
It's just it is beyond insanity to me that everybody watches a third string quarterback go out and carve up the worst defense in the NFL, and all of a sudden this defense that has been complete and utter garbage, gutter trash all year long is going to magically become something that resembles an actual true NFL offense. So it's wild to me. Trot out
Listen,
Zonovan
No,
Jackson
next
or whatever his
game.
name is.
No,
Whatever
mom
his-
and dad.
whatever
Next
his name
game.
is. Yeah, Trot Zonovan Jackson or whatever in the hell his name is. Out
Next
there and
game.
yeah, do all of it. It's just
Sorry, son.
just crazy.